All right, we will go ahead and call to order the February 11th meeting of the Kansas Board of Regents. Appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. We do have one modification to today's agenda. We'll be adding a legislative update. Obviously, the legislature is currently working on items relevant to us. And so that update will be provided by Fred Patton or Kelly Oliver, depending on their availability during today's meeting. So would ask that you add a legislative update to today's meeting agenda. Okay, moving on down the agenda. First up is consideration of the minutes from the June 14th board meeting and January 29th special meeting. Any discussion among the regents about the minutes? If not, would entertain a motion to approve. Okay, have a motion by Regent Crocker.
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Mendoza. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. All right, any introductions that need to occur this afternoon? Looking at our presidents, don't see any introductions. All right, we'll move into the chair report. First of all, just wanted to be among the first to congratulate President Flanders on his retirement, which was announced a couple of weeks ago. President Flanders has dedicated literally decades of service to higher education in Kansas, and is certainly leaving it in a much better place than he found it, which I think is the goal that most of us have in our career. But certainly items like the board strategic plan, I know you had a huge part of not only implementing that, but creating it as well. And we're seeing significant results from that. That's due to your leadership, President Flanders. And I just hope you know that how much we appreciate your service, your dedication, because it will continue to impact Kansans for generations to come. So please give a big round of applause for President Flanders. Otherwise, I mentioned, obviously, it's the legislative session is in session. So tonight, the regents, the CEOs, and the government affairs folks will host a reception with the legislators over at the Beacon. We look forward to that opportunity to meet with the legislators and discuss the great work that higher ed does to support Kansas families, businesses, and students, and advance prosperity in our state. We obviously value the partnership that we have with the legislature, and we're thankful for the opportunity to work with them to build the best possible higher education system here in Kansas. So that will conclude my chair report, and I will turn it over to President Flanders for the President and CEO report.
Thank you, Chair Benson. Just a couple of items. Kansas has been selected to participate in the Fair Chance to Advance initiative, which is through Jobs for the Future. Our Department of Corrections is the lead agency, and we've already had many of our colleges participating in education within the correction system. And so we look to improve and remove systemic barriers, create clear connections to education and employment. One thing we have discovered here in Kansas, which we've been successful with, is not only do you need to deliver the education, you also need to link individuals to employers, and so that you can really reduce recidivism as you do that. And so we're excited to participate in that. We've also been selected to be a member of the Holistic Advising for Student Success Initiative. That's led by the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association. I think probably that selection came from all the work that the institutions have done with student success and the success that we've had there. And so we will be developing some 2- and 4-year institution teams and be part of that initiative as well. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, President Flanders. Any questions? All right, we will move now to our Council of Faculty Senate Presidents report. I'll call on President Rochelle Rowley from Emporia State University this afternoon. Welcome.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update from the Council of Faculty Senate Presidents. We're finalizing the IB program review. So far, there have been no suggestions for any revisions. Everyone is on course to provide Faculty of the Year nominees by May 15th. We're keeping an eye on legislation and the impact that that those bills could have on faculty protections and academic freedom. And most importantly, we're looking forward to breakfast with all of you tomorrow morning.
As are we. Any questions for President Rowley? All right, thank you again. Moving on to our Students Advisory Committee report, President Aswad Zaran, also from Emporia State. Welcome, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
If you will turn your mic on. Yeah, yep.
Thank you, Chair Benson. It's working now. Congratulations, President Flanders. Thank you so much for all your support and help in leading students to a better future. Really, the update on our end is we had a fantastic time last week, February 4th, when we took all of our student representatives and students to the Capitol, and we had a chance to speak with our legislatures. It was a fun time because we got to talk to them, understand them, but also give our input on how we see things on the ground as students. So that was much appreciated. We were also without planning, had some opportunities to listen to some of their deliberations as they had some of their committees. So that was appreciated as a good experience. In our meeting today, we discussed going forward. I know we have some student fee discussions that are coming up. So we're planning to work with our chief financial officers and our presidents and our universities to understand more about that and bring the student feedback on that part. And with that, my report concludes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Any questions? All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Yes,
Question for
yeah, Regent Parasker.
From the students last year, we heard about fees quite a bit, book fees. Is that getting any better? What are your thought process on that?
Yeah, I know every institution's different, but I think from the discussions we've had, there's been some conversations that I think half of us are thinking about not increasing any fees and half of are really still in that discussion of if they do need to increase it for inflationary purposes. I can't speak for the other institutions, but I can get you that information. But I know at ESU we have the Hornet Bundle, which is something that students appreciate because they don't have to pay additionally out of what the classes that they're taking. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll move into our standing committee reports and academic affairs. Regent Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Benson. BASC held a virtual meeting on Wednesday, January the 27th. We reviewed a new program proposal from Fort Hays State University, which was a BS in Financial Forensics and Fraud Investigation. BASC approved to place that on today's board's consent agenda. Misty Knox, who is a consultant for academic affairs, provided an apply-free days report, which concluded with a recommendation that October the 5th through the 9th of 2026 be designated as a Kansas apply-free days for academic year 2027. This is a change from 3 to 5 days during which all Kansas students can apply for admission free of charge. The board will hear the report and recommendation this afternoon during the discussion agenda. Director Christy Dangermond presented recommended amendments to the spoken English language competency policy. The revisions are needed because of a change in scoring on one of the tests referenced in the policy. This item also has been placed on today's discussion agenda. Today's BASC meeting, Director Christy Dangermond reviewed the template for the AY 2026 performance report and the associated scoring rubric. This will be the last year for the reporting of the current performance agreements for AY 2024 through AY 2026. BASC approved the rubric outlining point distribution for the AY 2026 performance report. Academic Affairs will work on the next set of agreements in the coming months. Vice President Bonzraki gave an update of other academic affairs work, indicated that they will be working on the next performance agreement along with the chief academic officers. A one-year bridge agreement is under consideration to carry us through this coming year, and it will allow us, we think, to be in a stronger position to plan for the next 3-year agreement. And I think too will provide us some data to show whether what we're doing is working and helping with student success and access. She also informed us that Kansas was selected to participate in SHIOs, which is the State Higher Ed Executive Officers Holistic Advising for Student Success Initiative. The work will help strengthen advising, align it with state priorities, and build cross-sector I'm having a lot of difficulty today. Collaboration among advisors. And congratulations to Vice President Bondraki. I know that she wrote that grant, or I guess it's a grant, or at least that we got that. I think that that is great. So, and also thank you to Sam Christie Dangermond for writing this report for me that I haven't been able to read very well. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Regent Johnston. Any questions regarding academic affairs? Right, fiscal affairs and audit, Regent Dicus.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Benson. I'm going to try to paraphrase. I don't want to try to read and stumble too. Yeah, we had a agenda call on the 28th of January and met earlier this morning at Fiscal Affairs. Had a discussion this morning regarding what the board could consider and the Fiscal Affairs Committee around capital management projects at the universities, what we could do to make those more efficient use of the time and reduce the possibility of continually coming back before the committee and the board on lengthy term projects. Yeah, we also then heard from Mike Lowry of Allen Gibbs and Holick for an external management review at Pitt State University. Yeah, this was done with the change in the leadership there. That is a requirement of the board that anytime there's a leadership change, we have an external review. All things came back good during that time frame. We then heard a presentation from Jeff Hunter, who is the Director of Financial Reporting for KU regarding the composite. No, what am I? See, you got me all screwed up now. I can't even. Composite Financial Index. You've always been there. Composite Financial Index for the universities. Gave us an indication of what that was about, how the index is calculated and what it means to the universities. We then started with each of the universities on their annual financial reports, including the Composite Financial Index and the current year budget status. We heard from Pitt State University, Fort Hays State, and Emporia State today. We will hear from the other universities at our March meeting. Yeah, those all reports were received during our Fiscal Affairs Committee this morning. We then looked at the agenda. Main focus at that point was on the discussion agenda this afternoon that you will hear the student health plan benefits and rates on that. Not only did we hear from David Miller, the CFO at Wichita State, who chairs that committee, but also Oswald Zaran talked to us regarding the students and what their thoughts were on those plans and benefits. We then heard a report from Elaine on the budget process over at the state, which we will hear more about as we go forward. And that was the gist of our meeting this morning.
Thank you, Regent Dicus.
Best of luck to anybody else who has to read this stuff.
Any questions for Regent Dicus? All right, well done. Thank you. Governance Committee report, I'll give that. I think it was our shortest agenda that we had this morning, the shortest agenda of the year, but the longest meeting of the year because there was so much great information. We received the University of Kansas and the University of Kansas Medical Center's annual campus safety, security, and IT reports. And obviously they're busy in any given year, but especially with the World Cup coming to the Kansas City area, and then some of that traffic spilling over to Lawrence and other communities close by. That's increasing the workload on both of those campuses, but they're well planned, well executed, and now just be able to look forward to the exposure that obviously the World Cup will bring this part of the world, and to know that visitors and participants and everybody that will be there will be safe. So we really appreciated the report this morning and all the planning that's gone into that. So that will conclude the governance report. Happy to answer any questions related to that. Okay, We'll move into the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that my fellow regents need to pull off the consent agenda? If not, would entertain a motion to approve. Okay, have a motion by Regent Johnston,
Second.
second by Regent Amar. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda is approved. Moving on to the discussion agenda, we have 3 items related to academic affairs. So Regent Johnston, didn't know if you wanted to tee any of these up, but the first one is to act on proposed amendments to the spoken English language competency policy. And I believe to present is Vice President Bonds Racky.
Good afternoon, Regents. This item starts on page 63 of your packet. K-Board policy indicates that any prospective faculty or GTA whose native language is not English must have their spoken English competency assessed prior to employment. If the prospective employee is found to be potentially deficient in speaking ability through this assessment, the prospective employee must meet one of 4 criteria to be eligible for an appointment without spoken English language remediation conditions. One of these criteria is a minimum score of 22 on the speaking section of the TOEFL IBT. A few months ago, KU brought it to our attention that there are changes to the TOEFL IBT exam that just went into effect in January. Those changes include a revised scoring. While the old range was 1 to 30, the new range will be 1 to 6. KU's Associate Vice Provost for International Affairs, Roberta Pokpan, and Applied English Center Director, Pam Pearson, researched the new test and brought forward a recommended new score of 4.5, which they indicate is roughly equivalent to the 23 on the older version of the test. Further, since these scores are good for 2 years from the date of the test, the updates to the policy allow for maintaining the old score for students who took the exam prior to January 21, 2026, to prevent students from having to take the new version of the test if they've already completed the old version. The other state universities are in agreement with these policy updates, and the Council of Chief Academic Officers approved these changes at the January 14th meeting. Board staff concur with the Council of Chief Academic Officers and the Board Academic Affairs Standing Committee in recommending approval of the policy changes. I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Vice President Bonds Racky? If not, would entertain a motion to approve. Okay, motion by Regent Johnston.
I can second.
Okay, second by Regent Parasker. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it's approved. Thank you so much. Next up, we'll receive a report on the Kansas Free Application Days from Misty Knox. Welcome, Misty. Turn your mic on, please. Oh, there you go. Good assist, President Newsom.
Thank you, Chair Benson. Regents, great to be here. I want to first extend my appreciation to DRP, our research and planning team on compiling the data, and for our institutions who were able to gather that data and meet with us in order to provide data within this report today. At the November 19th BASC meeting, members were provided with a detailed data report, which is available on our website. Next slide. To locate that information, you can go to the kansasregents.gov website, student tab, and then under apply free days. Towards the bottom there, you can see the 2023 report, 2024 report, and the 2025 report. The next slide. The Kansas Free Application Days is modeled after Colorado's Free Application Days. Those days were 3 days. We implemented that in July of 2023. We're now in the 3rd year of the pilot phase. During this 3-day window, all public institutions in Kansas, along with private institutions, waive their undergraduate application fees for Kansas residents. Next slide. Here's a current snapshot of our application fees across Kansas public institutions. At this time, we have 4 universities and 2 technical institutions who charge an application fee. And for transfer students applying, there are only 3 public institutions who charge an application fee. That is Fort Hays, K-State, and Wichita State. Next slide. This slide highlights the year-round need-based application fee waiver. This option is available to students in Kansas. So while the Kansas Free Application Days provides a universal fee opportunity each fall, students who demonstrate financial need can request an application fee waiver anytime throughout the year. Institutions vary on the way they collect this information. For instance, Fort Hays State University requires completion of a form submitted to the institution, while other universities have the question embedded within their application process. Eligibility for the need-based fee waiver is on your screen there, certain indicators for economic hardship. Next slide. There are several other opportunities for fee waivers for their application fees beyond the need-based fee waiver. For instance, Fort Hays provides waivers for students participating in outreach programs and concurrent enrollment partnerships. K-State allows applicants to note fee concerns directly on their application and offers waivers for active duty military and veterans. KU grants waivers for first-year applicants upon request. No further documentation is required. Wichita State offers waivers for students attending select admissions events. High schools may also advocate on behalf of students and out-of-state students receiving free and reduced lunches as well. So as you can see, there are a lot of fee waiver opportunities along with the Apply Free Days, representing a significant institutional investment. Next slide. Here's a snapshot of the national landscape. There are 23 states that offer some form of free application initiative, from 3 days to year-round initiatives. Next slide. Here you'll see mapped geographically the distribution of the state fee-free initiatives. The lighter shades are the shorter campaigns. Darker shades are representing the longer periods. Next slide. The data presented today comes from the KEDS AY collection. This data is based on unit record submissions from the Kansas public institutions. So reading from left to right, today's data is based on the Apply Free Days, which occurred November 2023. So those students could enroll in summer 2024, fall 2024, and then spring 2025. This is representing the 2025 application cohort. Next slide. Here we see the dollar amounts institutions told us they waived for the Apply Free Days initiative. For our state universities, that was around $285,000. Technical colleges, right around $11,000. So $296,000 in fees waived during the Apply Free Days only. This does not represent other waivers, such as the need-based fee waiver or application event fee waivers that I've mentioned. Next slide. Here we see the summary of all the yield data, not only during the Apply Free Days, but also outside of that 3-day window, and then the overall yield. So we see the sectors there on the left. So for state universities, the Apply Free Days applications, those students yielded at a 28%. Outside of that window was a 39.4%. Overall yield about 38%. And you see the municipal university Apply Free Days yield about 60%, community college about 37%, technical colleges about 56%. On the bottom row, the totals really depict system-wide what we're seeing. So for the Apply Free Days, those applications submitted during the 3-day window were at a 30.5%. Compared to applications submitted outside of that 3-day window, 41.7%. All of them together is a 40.8%. So in summary, the total yield for the Apply Free Days applications is approximately 11 percentage points lower than the yield for the applications submitted outside of that 3-day window. Next slide. This data was also disaggregated by age of the student when they submitted their application to the institution. So during the 3 days, students under the age 18 yielded at a 43.9%. Moving across the row, you can see how that compares to those students who applied outside of the 3-day window, and then the overall yield for under 18 being 70.2%. Moving down age 18-19, we're at a 25.2%. For those students during the 3-day window. Excluding those 3 days, 35.4, overall yield 34.1. What's interesting is looking at the 20 plus age ranges. This shows we are reaching some adult population during this 3-day window. So students age 20 to 24, these may be students who took a gap year a few years before returning to college. But what we see here is that students aged 20 to 24 are yielding at a higher rate than any other age group. They're also yielding higher than the students who are applying outside of the 3-day window. The same is true for the age 25 and plus age group. So these students are yielding higher than the free application days, or than those during the free application days than any other application period that's submitted. Next slide. Now we'll take a look at underserved populations on the next 2 slides. First, here we see the students who are first generation compared to non-first generation. So our first generation students are, those are yielding at a higher rate than students who are non-first generation as they self-reported on their applications. Next slide. Another look at yield by population. So for our Black and African American population, those apply free days application yield about 23.2, Hispanic about 30%, white about 32%, and others about 25%. Next slide. So to provide some depth and voice to the numbers that we see, I actually conducted some dissertation research, which included an urban, suburban, rural Kansas high schools, interviewed school counseling staff, and surveyed seniors. One question we continue coming back to is whether the Kansas Free Application Days reaches students who are not originally planning to apply to college. So some preliminary findings across all school contexts. Counselors reported that students who had no prior intention of applying to college did submit applications during the free application days. The student survey results confirm this. 10% of the student respondents indicated they had no initial intention of applying to college prior to the campaign, and every one of those students also reported they submitted an application during the 3-day window. Counselors reported that the free application days provided a clear structure and timeline when applications should be completed, while also reducing hesitation in the perceived risk of applying. And also we have a program called Apply Kansas within our state, and this is an opportunity for high schools to provide time during the school day to support students with their application completion. They mentioned applying alongside peers with counselors and staff available to support created a sense of momentum and increased student confidence. So it was a building-wide momentum that normalized college application submissions and prompted that this is when we take actions to apply. Finally, counselors recommended extending the free application days just a couple days within the same month in order to create consistency and particularly allow some of the larger high schools to reach more students during their Apply Kansas application completion support initiatives. They wanted to preserve the urgency that the campaign creates. Next slide. Finally, these data and recommendations were presented for feedback through constituent groups, similar to previous years, including the 4-year public institutions, the Apply Free Days Committee. We have a member of SAC on that committee. We also have the Apply Kansas Committee. There's a CACRO member dedicated to that, as well as school counselors across the state and some admissions directors as well. We also vet this through the KICA leadership, Independent Colleges leadership, which we feel like for the Apply Free Days Committee, we have invited provosts to come to some of those meetings, so we felt like we were capturing all constituent groups. We propose this year to serve as a final year in the pilot phase for the Apply Free Days. With one additional year of data collection, we would feel more positioned to make a more informed decision about the future of the Apply Free Days. And with that, it's recommended before you to extend the Apply Free Days from 3 days to 5 days, running Monday through Friday in October. October has been the longstanding college application month in our state. With that, I'll stand for questions.
All right. Thank you, Misty. Great report. Any questions for Misty? I will say that I was one that when we initially discussed this 3 years ago was a little skeptical on whether it would be beneficial, especially given that I think the most expensive application fee was $40, and just wondered if that would be enough to move the needle. Clearly it has. And then as we had breakfast with the Student Advisory Council representatives back in September, I believe it was, they spoke very strongly about how popular it is among their fellow students. And as they pointed out, $40 is $40. And so as you put that stack together, just eliminating any expense at all was greatly appreciated by the students. So I'm glad we're continuing that for another year. Yes, Chancellor.
You got a bigger finger than me. Thank you, Chair Benson.
Got an engineer.
Yeah, have an engineer. Misty, was there any feedback from the admissions officers about workload of the volume that comes in an incredibly short period of time? And are they able to cope with that adequately, or did you get any feedback on that at all? That's just one thing that I have heard of that has been a challenge.
Very good question. We spoke about this the month after, sort of in November, after the Apply Free Days this year, just to better understand the impact to our institutions. Reason being, every year we're worried about and want to understand the impact to our campuses. This year, I was delighted to hear our campuses articulated they were more able to handle that workload in the third year of this initiative. So they felt like the number of applications coming in was more doable. They were able to turn those applications a lot sooner. It's a very good question.
Chair Benson.
Yes, Regent Johnston.
First, thank you. Great report. And I appreciate the fact that we're getting some data in to see, how this is working. I wonder if you could speak to the fact that when we did meet with the student group, they had said something about having application free day in October and then also possibly again in March, and maybe talk a little bit about why we didn't consider that at this time.
Certainly. Good question. So we took that back to our constituent groups. Some of the feedback that we heard was the configuration of the application portals, outreach, marketing would be impacted. School counselors obviously had mentioned the consistency that was during the Apply Kansas Steering Committee. There was mixed feedback from our constituent groups, really curious about the unintended consequences of those late application submissions, maybe missed scholarship deadlines, missed financial aid opportunities for those students who likely need it the most, potentially disadvantaging students. We also would not have the yield data for February dates to understand the impact until October of 2028. With that, institutions understood we want more students to be aware of this opportunity, and they have agreed to increase marketing efforts around those fall dates to ensure widespread knowledge of those Apply Free Days.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just want the students to know that we are listening, and that's something that we took a look at. And I appreciate the fact that you had looked into it for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else for Misty?
No, good job.
All right. Thank you so much, Misty.
That is an action item.
It is an action item for us to approve this for academic year 2027. So would entertain any discussion related to that. If not, a motion to approve.
I would move that we approve the recommendation before
Okay.
us.
I can second.
Okay, motion by Vice Chair Mendoza, second by Regent Parasker. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you again, Misty. All right, moving on, a couple of items from Fiscal Affairs and Audit. First up, act on student health insurance benefits and rates for plan year 2026, 2027. I believe our presenter is David Miller.
Good morning.
David.
Good afternoon, Chairman Benson and Regents. I am the CFO for Wichita State, and I have the pleasure this year of serving as the chair of the Student Insurance Advisory Committee. Each year, the chair rotates amongst the different CFOs at each institution. As you have outlined in your agenda materials, in 2006, the legislature granted authority to the Board of Regents to enter into contracts for voluntary health insurance coverage for students attending the state universities and their dependents. With the current contract with United Health Student Resources bid in 2020 and structured for a 10-year term, and it does include provisions in which it could be terminated with or without cause, because that is a pretty long term for a contract. The Student Insurance Advisory Committee serves in an advisory capacity with representation from all 6 state universities, including the University of Kansas Medical Center. That committee voted unanimously after several discussions with United Health Student Resources to recommend for board consideration the modest increases in the insurance rates of 3.21% for Plan 1, followed by 3.23% for Plans 2, 3, and 4. The process of rate negotiation did kick off a little bit later than normal this year. The reason for that was that United Health wanted a little more time in order to consider some of the considerations related to international enrollment and what that might mean in relation to rate premiums and what they might come back with. After several discussions with United Health that centered on the program experiencing moderate increases in insurance claim rates, as well as consideration of in the previous policy year, there was a 6% reduction in the rates applied for students. In addition, the current market for health coverage and the modest rate increases that are before you today, the committee recommended adoption of the proposed rates. The committee also recommends inclusion of the Healthiest You telehealth service, which is a 24/7 virtual teledoc service, which comes at no additional cost to the students and no additional premium costs, either in the current policy year or in future years. And as part of the adoption process, the proposed rates have been presented and adopted by the Council of Business Officers, the Council of Presidents, Fiscal Affairs and Audit, and now before the full board. Happy to stand for any questions and recommend the board's adoption.
Okay, thank you, David. Questions for David?
Chair Benson, I have a
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
So according to my understanding, last year it went 6% down and then this year we are 3% up.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
And I agree telehealth is exceptionally good service, but do we have stats on how many students actually used it last year?
This would be the first year in which we would have the program as part of our program.
Okay.
It has been offered by United Health for a number of years previously, but it's never been included within the Regents program previously.
Would that include therapy?
I'm sorry, Regent.
Would that include therapy sessions for the student?
So the telehealth will cover essentially 2 different things. It will cover a physician's visit at no cost, and there is a visits related to mental health, but it does have a limit or a cap as to how many visits that could involve. And I'm afraid I don't know what that cap is,
Okay.
but there is a cap for the mental health visits.
All right.
Any other questions for David? If not, would entertain a motion to approve. Okay, Regent Dicus, second by Regent Crocker. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you again, David. Next up, item C, receive annual report on the Board of Regents strategic plan, Building a Future. President CEO Blake Flanders takes the scenic tour from back here to the podium.
Thank you, Chair Benson. The much anticipated report. I know that I can feel the tension. So first, I do want to thank Matt Keith for helping to put this together and actually not helping, he actually did it. And worked with all these slides and everything. And then behind that, obviously, is our DRP team. Just really unbelievable to get all these data around and get this report ready. It really I just represent the very tip of the spear on this, and so wanted to be sure and let those folks know that we appreciate what they do. Our plan, and we're currently conducting some focus groups to update the plan. I believe as we think about the timeline, we may want to revisit that goal and say, probably finalize the plan next year with some of that information that we're gathering now. We're hearing many of the same things. I would just tell you that as we get to the business section, labor is still tight. Talent is at a premium. Every economic development project that I'm on, it's always about how much is the labor going to cost and is there enough? And it dominates the entire conversation. And so what we do in higher ed as an economic driver, I think really matters to the future of our state, and our state won't be strong without a strong higher ed system. Our plan is as more external as we look at serving Kansas families, supporting business and advancing prosperity in our state. What we know is, I always like to say the why. Why is education beyond high school? Why does it matter? It does lead to improved wages. We don't see it as much right now because the labor force is tight, but it does lead to increased job security. So the minute we see a downtrend, and we will have cycles, more education allows individuals to have more job security. And then there's a number of benefits beyond money. We always talk about, well, you'll earn $1 million more throughout your career. What that is one thing, but there are many benefits. We know that people volunteer more if they have advanced degrees. They have greater health outcomes and just a number of things beyond the money piece. Having said that, we do need to look at the earnings from degrees because that should be the low bar. You need to earn a family sustaining wage once you complete that degree, because then you can go on and really plan your life in an entirely different way. This is just Georgetown estimates of jobs as you look at educational attainment and the median annual earnings. And I've given this part of this report to legislators and other groups. And I always say, we have these data, but most of the time people won't believe them. It really is amazing to me. I'll always hear, I had an uncle, he didn't graduate from high school, he made over $1 million. And I always say that's one. That's why that's a good story, because it rarely happens, okay? So it doesn't mean that in each of these individual groups, you might have very high achievers, but your best chance is additional education. So all you're doing is increasing your chances of having a lifestyle, and you can see the difference in those degrees. Again, we talked about added job security. We've had downtrends. We've had the Great Recession. This will happen again. That's what we know. And so that's something that we really want to focus on. And then one thing I did mention was the lower rates of crime and incarceration. That's something that is very important, and you can almost predict number of prison beds by looking at those early educational outcomes. And so extra education matters. I think the secret sauce of the board's plan is that they didn't just put numbers out there. Is what you all said is, we also want to do things that influence those numbers and make sure that's happening. So we said our populations of need-based students is growing. It's the growing population in Kansas. And actually more affluent populations, have stopped having children, essentially. I mean, not totally, but it has slowed down. People are getting married later. They're going to have less kids. And so that's fewer people going through the higher ed system. So we knew that groups that needed more need-based aid were going to be the growth groups in the market of the future. And so the board advocated for need-based student financial aid, and I would say very successfully. We've also, it hasn't been a firm agreement, but we've had an agreement with the universities in terms of tuition and fee affordability. And I think if you look at the trend line of our state and other states, we've kept tuition and fees very affordable. And mostly as we've looked at CPI increases, the universities have generally said, we'll ask for half of that, and then the other half we'll gather through efficiencies. And that's kind of what you've seen. If you look at that trend line of the last 5 or 6 years of tuition increases, they've really been very affordable. Having said that, another impact on tuition and fees is the amount of state support. So if we see state support eroding, there has to be an ability to operate an institution. And so that puts upward pressure on tuition. As you remember, we also had benchmarked all of our universities with the National Institute of Student Success. I really don't like calling it the NIST playbooks anymore because there are playbooks. We've internalized those practices. Not everybody was for this initially. There were a number of groups on campus who said, we don't think we need to change this. I will say this, those changes have made a difference, and we can see that as we go forward. One of the few states to have a general education core without legislation. I'm proud of the groups that got together and got that done. We've got some system-wide transfer degrees as well, where if you earn 60 credit hours at community college, you also then keep all those credits and transfer into a degree. Math pathways is something that I know Academic Affairs has been exploring and we're moving forward with, in that there's no science behind it. College algebra became the designated course for every degree area when we know that there is other math that really should be, other math types that should be looked at, and so we're doing that. Co-requisite remediation is evidence-based. One thing, we had a lot of good people doing a lot of good things with remediation, and you're going to see later in the report that there's a need for that. Now, at the state universities, we can't do remediation with any state funds. So we have to use other funding to do that remediation, but there is always going to be a need for that. If you do it in a non-co-requisite way, it just doesn't work very well. No one ends up being successful, and we know that with co-requisite, we really improve those rates, and so we need to do that. And then you just heard about the Apply Free Days and Apply Kansans initiative. So this area of focus emphasizes system-wide approaches that keep cost lower for Kansas families. We have metrics. We look at student loan amount, total need-based aid, and we have some additional metrics. That's another piece that I'll probably be recommending, is to take a look at the dashboard. Our dashboard is a little bit like the dashboard of a 747 or fighter pilot. There's a lot on the dashboard. I think it might be wise for the board to say, hey, we've built this. Let's see if we can take it down to what is really important. What do we really need to see? Because sometimes when you have so many measures, you actually have none. So what's happening here? Since 2020, student loan debt of Pell recipients at state universities at graduation has decreased 15%. So holy cow, it actually worked. We are driving down the debt for Pell recipients. Now, what's amazing is non-Pell recipients actually borrow more. So if you just look at student loan debt, I always thought, well, that's a great measure. Not always. Affluent families borrow money and they just then pay it off. So it sometimes just the total debt isn't the best indicator. We're low on both areas, so student loan debt's not a problem for Kansas. But for those students that are in need and have financial need, we're driving that down. As you look at yeah.
If you could go back to that slide, I think what's a little bit misleading about this is of people who have debt. So 50% of our students have zero debt. The other 50% are represented on this graph, and you're absolutely right about everything you said, but there's a whole bunch of students out there that managed to get through without debt.
I think at your institution, it is half of them never borrow anything. For the entire system, I think we're at 29 or 30% that never have one. So this is only the students that have debt.
Yeah.
And then you also have, sometimes in here, you'll have someone that has a jumbo, I call them kind of a jumbo loan. They always pay those off. It's amazing that they usually went through med school or something like that. They've got great jobs. They pay those off. Sometimes they're in a service-based kind of thing. So, the students we really need to watch are the ones that just have a little debt that end up defaulting on it. And so we're very aware of that. But I agree, there is a number that do not have any debt at all. You can look at the trajectory of our need-based aid at the state universities. It's made a difference and it matters. And much of that is run through the Kansas Comprehensive Grant. And
one question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to follow up on that, I've gotten asked this in the legislature several times. So I would be correct if I said student debt among college goers at our public universities are about 22,000 for Pell and about 25,000 for non-Pell.
of those that have debt.
Of those who have debt, and anywhere from about 30% to 50%, depending on the institution, have
Yeah,
debt.
let me get you the exact
Okay.
number for that, but it is a significant number that do not ever borrow.
Okay, that would be important to answer that question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah, some families, while their kids were in school, just cut back everything else and never took a trip anywhere.
Right.
Might have been us. Yeah. So, but no, no, I mean, some families are in a position to pay that, and that's a real blessing. So we run most of that need-based aid in the state program. Now, this isn't need-based aid that comes from the individual foundations, but the need-based aid that comes through the state, and it's matched by the universities, is run through the Kansas Comprehensive Grant. I want to talk just a little bit about that. There's much more need at the universities than currently the comprehensive grant serves. The legislature, as you know, has passed legislation where we need to divide that 50-50 with the independent colleges, and those are those nonprofit colleges that have been in Kansas for a number of years. And this is not a value judgment. I'm just showing the differences here between the different sectors and what's happened with those fees or with those loans. And so the public universities have been able to award just a little over half of the applicants. So they give an applicant pool, people apply for a need-based aid grant. And what I am really encouraged by is they've been very strategic in saying, how are we going to use this money to close gaps? And maybe they have another scholarship over here and we can close a gap over here. But you only have a 50-50 chance of getting one of these if you go to a state university or Washburn, a public university, only 50-50 chance. If you go to an independent institution, you got a 75% chance. So 3 and 4 receive it, and it's over double in terms of an average award. So their students receive more per award than at the public universities. So another thing we looked at is, well, what kind of families are receiving the scholarships? So the student aid index, and it used to be the expected family contribution, but that changed, help me, 2 years ago, 2 years ago maybe, is a figure derived from the federal application for federal student aid, FAFSA. It's how an institution uses family income to assess a student's financial need. A student receiving a full Pell Grant for the coming year is considered to have exceptional financial need, typically indicating their family income is at or below 175% or 225% for single parents of the federal poverty level. Full Pell, which is $7,395, is awarded to those with an SAI of 0 or less. Okay, so that would be a full Pell student. Students with an SAI of less than 3,000 would receive half Pell. Okay. So what kind of students are receiving the need-based aid? This is supposed to be designed for students with need. And as you look at the different institutions who are awarding that, I think you can see a marked difference. You know, let's just take University of Kansas, $305 is what that SAI was. So you can, and that's average. So many of those students, K-State, it was actually negative. Okay. You know, high water for the public system is, you know, about $600, which I think if we would just intuitively think if you only had $600 to contribute, you probably do need some need-based aid. But you can see that it's very different for other institutions. Some institutions are awarding it where the SAI is 10,000. So, you know, fundamentally that student could attend a public university and probably not qualify for an award. So there's just some differences there. I thought you should know between the way the program is currently utilized. If we look at access, focuses on a system-wide approach to keep the system accessible to Kansans regardless of their circumstance. And we look at enrollment, college going rate, and then believe me, we have a number of other metrics. And we've all heard about the enrollment cliff. You've seen this slide. These are bursts that aren't going to happen, and they don't expect it actually to turn around for the entire century. So this is expected to be a longer term trend. Now, having said that, any event could make this change, right? So we don't know, but we do know in the near future those students aren't going to be there. I do think at a time when I was younger, if you'll remember, when the world was going to collapse due to population. Does anybody remember that crisis? So so this can change, but we know at least in the near future, we're going to have some headwinds with just total numbers. We are doing better with academic enrollment. We've got some institutions with record enrollments. The state universities, it looks like, have flattened and are in an up increasing. Technical colleges have been increasing the entire way. You know, the real puzzling graph on here is our community colleges that have probably the most inexpensive tuition, but maybe in communities that are shrinking and their enrollments have dropped significantly in the last 10 years. One strategy that previous boards have recommended is to increase the number of our non-resident students, our out-of-state students, to bring them in, you know, for additional talent. And we see that starting to begin to pay off. And I think we need to double down there. And I think the board needs to encourage is how do we aggressively recruit out of state, because we're going to need it to fuel this Kansas economy. There just isn't any doubt in my mind. We do have a more difficult time with college readiness. This has been a longer term trend, but these aren't our numbers internally. This is ACT. They just look at benchmarks, and you have these 4 areas, and if you qualify in all 4 areas, then you're college ready. You can be college ready in one area, but if you miss a couple areas, then we say you're not college ready. It used to work out really well. Some of you in economic development remember when it took about a third of the jobs required a baccalaureate degree. And so when a third of the students were college ready, that was just worked out just great. And then came the acceleration of the economy. And if you remember, Dr. Donna Ginther provided that report that said, hey, we're going to have new jobs and 90% of them are going to require baccalaureate degrees, and all of the technology changes. I mean, I even think about an automotive mechanic, or I'd say even a technician now. You better be able to read at the 12th grade level, because you're going to be reading manuals, and it's not going to be as easy as it once was to work on a vehicle. If you've ever lifted the hood, you know why. And so now we're about at 17% college ready. So the co-requisite remediation and some of those measures we're using, I think is going to be really important as we go forward. Looks like the college going rate is starting to tick up again. We'll take full credit for that, but there's probably a lot of factors going on there. And we just need to keep focusing on that, because we know as there's fewer bodies, we need to continue to work to improve this college going rate. I think emphasizing a message of the economics of college, of the great employment outcomes of college is something that's very important. And you know, the messaging from KBOR, many people out in Kansas, I know it'll be a shock, but they don't know who the Board of Regents is. So it's important for our institutions to have that message as well, because that's who they're really looking toward in terms of messaging. And then success, we know that access without success is a really empty promise, and we want people to be able to graduate. We've been looking at on-time graduation rates and graduates in jobs with sustaining wages. Our state universities, the graduation rates for on-time graduation rates are improving. Now, I would say, and we talked about this a little bit this morning, our overall success rate is relatively flat. And so as I'm digging into that, I'm going to dig in a little deeper, but I believe it's anytime you transition from an institution, you increase the risk of graduating. So you change. So when someone comes into a university, they get all of this entrance counseling, orientations, they know their way around. The best, probably the people that have the most success stay with that institution, go all the way through. You start moving around between and among institutions, it just increases your risk. And so that's something we've got to make easier for students, and think about how to make those on-ramps and off-ramps just a little easier. We do really well in terms of graduates in jobs with sustaining wages. I do think the board needs to dig deeper. We do have 14% of baccalaureate degree holders that do not have a sustaining wage job. So many of those, when we look at that unit record data, we know many of those are working part-time. That can be a choice, okay? So that's going to be a little hard to sort out. But if we have pathways that aren't paying off for students, we need to really look into that and make sure that that we either enhance that pathway so it can, or we need to eliminate that pathway so people don't graduate and not get in. But again, the overwhelming number get into jobs that pay well and that can support a family. And we really want to support our Kansas businesses, because if they can't find the talent here, they will go somewhere where they can. And we see that as they're coming in from the coasts and different places. They want to come here because at present, at times we do have surplus labor. We graduate more than our state economy employees and in certain disciplines. And so that's actually a real positive when you go to recruiting companies. We talked about Dr. Ginther's study and the amount of jobs that we're going to add that require a post-secondary degree. We need to be sure that the students that graduate can find those Kansas jobs. But I would say this, the market is incredibly competitive for our graduates. And when we've looked at, as an example, engineers, why wouldn't you stay in Kansas? Well, if you go to Texas, you're going to make $12,000 more. And so there's differences in wages, and we just need to be sure we communicate that with our employers so they know how competitive that market is. We look at the talent pipeline. We have an engineering initiative. I was kind of around at the beginning of that engineering initiative. It's amazing what has happened there as you looked at our early benchmark of 875. And this is graduates. This isn't it's one thing to enroll students. It's harder, particularly in engineering. These are graduates. And you can see we've exceeded that benchmark. They then re-upped that program. So it was going to sunset after 10 years. They decided in year 9 to continue it. And I think it's something that we should never take our foot off the gas, because those engineering jobs are economic multipliers. In other words, for every engineer you have employed, additional jobs are created. And so that's one that I think has been a real success for our system, and has been one that I've been able to talk to companies about that they've been really excited about. We've also got the Excel in Career and Technical Education program. That is, we used to call it Senate Bill 155 because that was the bill that went through. It started in 2012. For years, we'd done about 3,500 to 3,800 students a year, and you can see where we were at the beginning and now where we are now in terms of participating head count of those students in high school who wish to take career and technical education classes. I think, the Tech Ed Authority has looked at what pathways are really paying off for students, what pathways aren't. Something we need to really drill down and focus on that was an early focus of the initiative and has kind of went by the wayside a little bit. But we need to really look at credentials earned. This is not a program for career awareness. That should happen at the high school level with their career programs. This program really should be designed for career preparation. And so we want a credential to accompany that enrollment, and I think that's going to be important.
Before you leave that, President Flanders, it may be difficult to quantify that, but I would imagine the majority of students in Excel and CTE courses did not plan to go to college initially.
I think that, yeah, that's probably the case.
First of all, do you have a percentage, any ballpark figure on how many students in Excel and CTE classes did not plan to go to college, but then once they got a couple of these courses under their belt, they see that they can do it, they end up going to school? And then secondly, any guess on what the overall impact on student enrollment in the state has been a result of Excel and CTE?
Yeah, so what I would say is we'd have those data of the students who went and matriculated into college that maybe we probably aren't sure exactly if you'd plan to go or not, because that would take interviews. We wouldn't have that, but we know that a number were going that pathway because they weren't going to. Some of them, if you went a certified nurse aide pathway, they might have always been going into a nursing program and wanted that just as a prerequisite credential to get into that program. But in the heavier trades, probably many of those weren't planning on post-secondary ed. So we can get you those numbers. I don't have them right with me, but we can get you those numbers of how many actually went on. I think that many times someone tries these courses and says, "Hey, I can do this," and then they have an interest. And when someone's interested, it really changes the game. Something we don't talk enough about probably is the innovation that happens around our universities and the research and development funding. really a couple of things. Not only does it provide innovation for Kansas companies and really for even global companies, it also brings a lot of dollars into the state. And anytime you bring a dollar into the state and employ individuals, it's an economic boon for the state. It's almost like a small company, not so small, buried within the university that's bringing in resource from out of state. So it really can help Kansas companies. I would tell you that we have an aviation industry in Wichita, not because we just have talent there, but because companies collaborated on a wind tunnel and developed NIAR and the innovation sets in Wichita. That actually can hold a company, and I think that has had a big impact on why we've kept aviation where it is. You can see the change, and now when you get this next year, you know, there's going to be a lot of bumps on this federal research because there's some short-term things I think going on. So, you know, you might see some changes. You kind of need to look at this over time. But one number is this, you know, we've always tracked the business R&D, and Wichita State it's just unbelievable. Went from 82 million in 2019 to 150 million in business R&D. So how are you doing that? Yeah, you know, it really is that part of this is really exciting. And then just the growth that we've seen in total R&D dollars is exciting for our state. A lot of things going on now with health and Alzheimer's research and things that are going to benefit our community, cancer research, things that can really benefit our communities long term. We also have a higher percentage of graduates who are employed in Kansas upon entry. I'd like to think that that's part of the applied learning that we've seen our institutions really emphasizing, giving students, you know, it used to be you'd do that internship your junior year, and that's no longer the case. Students are doing it early in their college experience. They get connected to a company, and then they stay here. A good story is, you know, about 71% of our residents are staying in Kansas. But a really good story is that we're capturing more of our out-of-state residents. Yeah.
President Flanders, President Linton.
I think you just answered half my question. What was the percentage on the left and the right? So you said 71 on the left?
Yeah, so let's see, I had this down. 71% of our residents are staying. We've had a 3.2 percentage increase in the number of out-of-state graduates staying for work, where we went from 16.5% to almost 20%. So, you know, and then some institutions are a little higher. So as you bring somebody in from out of state, you know, you think, well, they're going to return to their state. Well, if we even capture 1 in 5, that's really good. And that's a point of emphasis that I think we can make a big difference for the Kansas workforce, emphasizing that. I'm not saying we're not going to turn our back on Kansans. That's our first priority. But for our Kansas businesses, they've got to have talent. We know that there's going to be shrinking graduation classes, and I think this is an area we really need to emphasize. Yeah.
I have to take a lesson from you. Can you comment a little bit about those paid internship experiences? I think, Rick, you guys have experimented with that pretty extensively, but one of the biggest challenges we have with our students who are working an average of 21 hours a week of having the ability to take a free internship and get that connectivity to our businesses. I know that the state's made little bits of investment here and there, but I think that's a real opportunity.
That I know that you have really, Wichita State's really tracked that and looked at it almost as a scholarship, you're able to do that. That's probably something that the board needs to put a budget ask around in the future, because I think that could be a direct benefit not only to students, but to Kansas businesses. We just need more. The thirst for talent is such where if we can get people connected to those Kansas businesses, you have a better chance of keeping them here.
President Uma.
I just wanted to comment on that issue too. It's really important that we need to start thinking about connecting students to business and industry, whoever hires them, the moment they show up on campus, and not wait till they're a junior, senior year. It's really too late at that point. Kind of start applying the skills they're learning early, then start to professionalize, and it just helps move that needle forward. And that's what's happened at Wichita State.
Yeah, so we have, a lot of good things going on the ground there. I think we could probably take it up to a system level and center and ask around that, because I do think, one area that also needs to be looked at is many of these teaching internships are unpaid. That's a problem. So if you're a first generation student and you want to be a teacher and you're going to go out and not get paid, that can be a real problem. I think policy wise, I'd encourage you to work with the state board and see what can be done about that. Because, so that shuts a number of people out of that career.
Yeah, I agree.
So economic development, as I've been in those meetings, I can tell you that we have university leaders in those meetings all the time as well.
President.
Yes.
I just wanted to add that on the workforce board, we are looking at unemployment, which is, of course, the basic thing to look at, but there is also underemployment. We have to strive for better jobs, better opportunities for Kansans. And that is where the education piece and the workforce piece comes together, and bringing in employer and making them aware that universities or technical colleges or other education system can upskill and provide that support for employer makes a huge difference in how we can retain quality in the jobs that we provide to our people. So just wanted to make a note that, yes, it's workforce would be looking on workforce board would be looking at it, but mostly they are concentrated on unemployment, but not really so much on underemployment.
Yeah, and so many times in terms of being able to increase the productivity of a company, my experience has been is and we need to work with these populations, but if you work with populations that have been unemployed for a number of months or perhaps years, that requires a different set of skills and interventions than someone who's just been employed, showed up to work every day, works hard every day, and happens to be underemployed. That's a little bit of an easier lift.
And then in future, we could expect AI disrupting certain industries, and very well qualified people could be seeing a temporary lack of an quality employment. And we have to prepare our universities to take on that kind of a role as well. It may not be too large numbers in Kansas, but that is going to eventually roll into our area.
I do think those markets we'll have to explore all. So yeah, good thought. So intentional economic development, we had planned to do those Pillar 3 presentations this month. We've decided we're going to do those next month, so you'll hear about that. We think next month too that Lieutenant Governor Secretary of Commerce Toland will be here, and so that'll be something we really focus on. And we've built those plans around really how do we help our communities and our state recruit and also retain companies. And then we have other items that I think are kind of bedrock, but also are important. We have the Blueprint for Literacy and our facilities initiative that I think we need to be sure and keep a focus on. I purposely took a bullet off here. I think, but this literacy crisis is a big storm coming, and there are just a number of students that are reading below the basic level. We always say this is not just a Kansas problem, it's national, but I always feel like that's kind of an excuse. The problem is here. And you know, it's something that I feel like can impact so many things, including college going rate. I always go back to the example, if you don't do something well and you're forced to do it, you'll do it. But as soon as you're not forced to do it, you won't do it anymore. So if you can't read and you're in school, it's not a good experience for you. You don't do well in any subject. And we might force you to go to school until you're a senior in high school, till the 12th grade. But as soon as that last bell rings, you're not going back. And now it might be later you decide, hey, I want to go back and I want to improve that. But generally, if we don't have this intervention, it's not a good story for any of us. We have the blueprint for literacy. We've got goals there. It looks like that's getting in the budget. I'm encouraged by that. We want to train those educators in the science of reading, and our colleges of education have pivoted their curriculum to make sure that they're aligned with that science of reading, and they've already had tremendous success at getting current teachers back into education and training through our universities, and then also changing their programs so that pre-service teachers are prepared as they go out into those schools. I think we're.
Vincent?
Yes. Regent Johnston.
I just wanted to say one thing about the blueprint for literacy. The always subtle Regent Dicus pointed out to me that my inability to read the Basque report was the reason that we needed to focus blueprint for literacy.
I actually crossed out that joke.
Yeah,
You.
but in all seriousness, it really is critical.
In there too. Couldn't get through mine.
You know, it is. I knew someone would make light of that, but you know, obviously this is a societal issue too. We got to have parents reading in the homes. We need all those things to happen. But we also bear some responsibility. We need to fix what we can fix. I think it's a mistake to say, well, everything needs to get fixed before we move forward. I think we need to fix what we can fix, and then we move forward together. We look forward to partnering with K-12 and the Kansas State Department of Education. I do want to touch on our facilities initiative. It's the best in the nation, and it was not popular to begin with. So not everybody loved the facilities initiative. And now I just feel a lot of love towards it. The legislature, when we decided, hey, we're going to start taking care of our campuses, we're going to start investing in facilities. They've been a partner and invested with us. And this didn't happen overnight. We've got a couple of campuses that are incredibly old. When you look at the number of buildings that are 100 years old, you know, it's amazing. We want to get things to a state of good repair. I always compare that to the classic car. We don't need them in mint condition. We need them in really good condition. And of course, inflation has really hurt us, but we've really increased the investment. We've got several, we look at space utilization, we got a maintenance assessment, space planning, strategic demolition. It really is something I think that's working. There probably needs to be, as you think about that, what are some things that you can do to kind of improve the initiative or to make it more sustainable? One thing we do is we kind of have artificial timelines on when we measure investment. So at one time when we started the initiative, I think we were doing just a little over 40 million a year, which was essentially the EBF money. last year we did over 200 million. Okay, in investment. But really those investments should probably come over a 3 or 4 year period. So probably Chad and I've talked about this, our architect is, do you do a rolling average on the investment? Because it's spiky. It doesn't always follow just the calendar year. And so you just kind of need to think about that and work with institutions. Should you get a little credit, maybe, if you over invested 1 year, and then the next year you maybe don't invest as much, the building doesn't function on a year calendar. And so I think that's probably something that needs to be looked at as we go forward. And then the demolition part has been key. We've taken 123 million backlog deferred maintenance liability offline. We need to do more of this. What we have learned, though, is every building has a constituency. And so they're not as easy to tear down as you might think. And so we have to be strategic there as well. We have a number of metrics that if you go to this site, you can see them all. And again, our data research and planning team, Matt Keith, all the research staff, the staff at the institutions that provide all the numbers have really been the energy behind this report. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
All right. Thank you, President Flanders. Questions? Yes, Regent Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can ask this question now, or if we're going to have time to go over. My question is about need-based aid. Might be a time to ask.
Okay.
It. So I know the legislature, at least in the House, has cut 2.3 million for need-based aid. And I imagine that's especially damaging. And so probably one of our priorities to get restored. It would be nice to hear from a few of you. I assume that hurts enrollment or retention. Maybe your best talking point on why need-based aid is so important.
I'd like to tell you about that need-based aid because it's a little different than the comp grant need-based aid. That was need-based aid that went directly to the institutions as a response to the benchmarking we did through the National Institute of Student Success, where they said you need emergency aid for students as well. So not just a traditional scholarship, but a first-generation student that's a junior that might run short by $200 or $300. If you can provide them with a grant, they'll go ahead and graduate. Otherwise, we would lose those students because they just didn't have the resource at that time. So I think that need-based aid, which I kind of coined as emergency aid, is super critical to our on-time graduation rates and our student success.
President Muma.
I was just going to comment about Regent Wolfmore's question. So this will reduce the number of students awarded by 1,165 students, and those are Pell eligible students. So it's the low income students who will be most impacted.
Thank you.
Maybe if I could add on to that, the other challenge with spiking levels of aid is not a 1 year commitment. Right. I mean, we can't get them a degree in 1 year. So both what Rick said and Blake has said is absolutely true, but without stability there of knowing how we're going to support that student throughout their entire journey really creates a real challenge around retention and graduation.
So just to follow up, so need-based aid is used for things. Give me some other examples.
So
What
there's
you might use need-based aid for.
We have two types. This was actually originated, I believe, during one of the COVID years. But we have the need-based aid that goes through the comp grant, and that's kind of the traditional scholarship. This need-based aid has more flexibility. It can be used for a scholarship, or it can be used in other ways. But to President Muma's point, it affects a large number of students. And, I remember scholarship programs. They were popular a number of years ago where you'd get scholarships as a freshman You remember that? And then they all went away as a sophomore, and that doesn't work very well for first generation students.
Okay, that's very helpful, all of this. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
President Mason.
I have what you would call a lagging comment, so wasn't keeping pace here, but I wanted to thank President Flanders to talk about the fact that we don't want to lose our Kansas residents to Texas because they pay more. So I wanted to pause and say, we also don't want to lose our students that graduate in rural communities. And so when we talk about sustaining wages, we have to think about a multiple of factors, including cost of living in certain areas, and have some more nuanced metrics to make sure that we can keep people in rural communities and not lose them all to the urban areas.
Good thought. Other questions, feedback for President Flanders? All right. Thank you so much. Great information. As President Flanders mentioned, the board agenda shows that we would receive the Pillar 3 reports. Again, as he mentioned, Lieutenant Governor and Commerce Secretary Tolan was scheduled to join us. We thought that would be a good tie. Unfortunately, he had to bump that to March, so we'll also bump those Pillar 3 reports to March as well, and look forward to that in a month. So moving on to acting on a request to name a space, and I'll turn it over to President Linton from KSU.
Well, thank you, Chair Benson, and the rest of the board. It's always a pleasure to come and request naming of spaces, because I think it shows progress and success of major initiatives, but it also gives us a great opportunity to be able to really highlight some of the great people that support our university. So I'm making reference to a letter written January the 13th, which is actually the request for naming of 3 different spaces as a part of the agricultural initiative, innovation initiative. If you remember, this is a pretty complex project. It's a $210 million project in total. It involves 10 different buildings, of which 2 come down, 2 get renovated, and then we have 6 new additional capital structures that will be built. The first of those 3 major new capital investments was a livestock arena, which was back in October, opened and named after the Bilbrey family, the Bilbrey Event Center. It's the other 2 that we're here to talk about today. One is a complex of buildings that supports our agronomy research farm, and then the other one is a $127 million interdisciplinary science that brings together baking science, grain science, animal science, food science, and dairy science. This letter for me is a little bit different because this finishes the project. So with the funds that come in for these 3 named spaces, we will have raised the entire $210 million for the project, which I don't think has ever happened at Kansas State University. Normally we have a 20 or 30-year note. So we're really proud of the College of Agriculture and the philanthropic team, and certainly our passionate donors that have supported us. The first of these 3 named spaces is the Western Star Global Grain and Food Center. This is that interdisciplinary science building that I had talked about. It'll be placed in between Call Hall and Weber Hall on our campus. Call Hall and Weber Hall have been renovated. This new building goes in between. It's where the livestock arena used to be. That livestock arena was taken down a couple of years ago. The naming of this facility is being done jointly by the Hale family and the Veneer family. So the Hale family, of course, has supported a lot of things on our campus, from student scholarships to journalistic arts to performing arts, and of course the library. They're also strong members of the Kansas State University Foundation Board of Trustees. Within that family, John and Ennis Hale, Lisa Hale, Alan Kathy Hale, and Karen Young. The Veneer family, I think you also know, being connected with our Veneer football complex, Marty and Mary Veneer were major contributors of this effort, and they've been so philanthropic. The entire family has been incredibly philanthropic to Kansas State University for decades. They provided student scholarships. They've been on the Board of Trustees. Mary Veneer was also the chair of the Board of Directors of the Kansas State University Foundation Board. What's really neat, I think, about this specific request is the Western Star brings these two related families together around the naming of their first farming operation and feed mill operation. It's kind of cool. The second space is also attached to the proposed Western Star Global Grain and Food Center. This would be an outdoor plaza that's adjacent to that building that would recognize the contribution from the Cruz family. Ronald Cruz and his son Doug are both K-State College of Agriculture alumni and also are on the Board of Trustees and have been very supportive towards student support and also have a professorship in the Department of Grain Science. The third space that we are requesting is the space that supports the Agronomy Research Farm, and this is 3 different buildings that are right across from the football stadium. This complex, again, is a cluster of newly constructed buildings, and it's being supported by Eldon Gideon, who graduated from K-State in 1957 with degrees in animal sciences and industry and agronomy. Eldon Gideon has also been very supportive in a number of different areas in the College of Agriculture to be able to support programs and to be able to support students. So Kansas State University and the Kansas State University Foundation are fully supporting, recognizing the generosity of the donors listed in this letter with the naming of these 3 spaces. Please help us put a stamp on finishing the required needs of funding for the agriculture initiative at Kansas State University. Thank you.
Thank you, President Linton. Questions? If not, would entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Regent Dicus, second by Regent Johnston. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carried. Thank you, President Linton. All right, as I mentioned, we are adding a legislative update, and Kelly Oliver will deliver that for us. Welcome, Kelly.
Good afternoon. I am filling in for Fred Patton, who is over in the State House, just trying to check everything that's happening because it's been a busy few weeks. We are on day 31, so we're a third of the way through the legislative session. It feels about like day 80. Next week, though, is turnaround, which is the midpoint of the session. It's important in that any bills that haven't made it through its House of Origin are dead for the rest of the session unless they're in an exempt committee. And there's lots of different ways in which they can move bills around to keep them alive throughout the session. So I'm just going to give an overview of some of the bills that we've been tracking. There's a longer list behind this, but I'll just highlight a few of those for you. The first is in the House. There's House Bill 2428, which is a DEI CRT bill. It requires, as you probably have heard, requires the board to establish curriculum and designate courses relating to DEI. Is actually being discussed this afternoon in House Higher Education, or not House Higher Education budget, just House Education. There's also proviso that's similar to this that's in the House version of the budget bill. Additionally, House Bill 2485, which is a bill that was introduced by our office that you all approved last December, and it is to settle repayment obligations and prohibit students that have already received a scholarship but are currently in repayment from getting a new scholarship. It's been passed out of committee and it's currently sitting in the full chamber of the House, and we hope to hear that that'll be heard soon. Good news, though, House Bill 2487, which is also our bill related to the Kansas Education Opportunity Scholarship, it unanimously passed the House chamber this morning. So yay, there's a win for us. And so it'll move on to the Senate then. Additionally, last week, there was a hearing on affiliations, which is House Bill 2523. It would allow permissive affiliations of community and technical colleges with public universities, but also with private, not-for-profit or independent colleges. There was another bill introduced this year related to tenure, 2746. Currently, it's in the Judiciary Committee, and there's not been a hearing set yet for it to be heard by that committee. The tenure bill that was introduced last year actually is still alive and could be brought back up, but those bills are still out there. On the Senate side, earlier this week, there was a hearing on the Promise Scholarship Act related to not being able to allow those funds to be used for co-requisite courses for students that are taking co-requisite. Finally, in Senate Ed as well, there was a hearing also on money on Workforce Pell. Elaine, do you want to talk about budget? I'm going to have her go through the budget bills and look at the comparison between what our request was and where the positions are in both the House and the Senate. Elaine was actually, we were watching what the Senate Ways and Means Committee was doing here just as you guys were meeting and updated it as we went along. So there's going to be changes compared to what you have actually at your place.
Okay, good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just going to hit a few of the highlights. We went over a lot of this in fiscal affairs this morning. The first item we've talked quite a bit about in the need-based aid and the $2.3 million reduction to that. So that takes us from roughly 24 million to 21 million. Using last year's awards from across the system, that would impact over 1,100 students. We'd have fewer awards available to keep the momentum going with the need-based aid. So the whole goal of that, and Dr. Flanders referenced this, it's intentionally very flexible for students. So if they need a $50 gap filled or they need $2,000, and we have information on the average awards, and generally it was between $2,000 and $3,000 per student. So these are not large amounts for our students, but they are very meaningful for our students. And also you'll notice the reference to the impact. So this is funding for the public universities, the 6 state universities, and Washburn as well. For the 2-year colleges, I want to highlight that both the House and the Senate have agreed to fully fund the rolling 3-year average of the cost for the tiered and non-tiered courses for each college. There is seemingly an agreement to reduce funding next year by $10 million. So that will affect the college's reimbursements next year for the courses they are delivering this year to students. There is funding in the Senate as requested for the student success initiatives. So you'll remember our discussion last summer, that funding was removed from our allocation, so it had to be requested as an enhancement. And the Senate has that funding in. The House has it only in as $5 million for the 2-year colleges and nothing for the universities. There is funding in both the House and the Senate for the blueprint. So the House has 5.5 million and the Senate has 5 million. The new nuance we have today is that the funding for the energy projects, the Senate has reduced their 10 million to 5 million, and it will just be for Kansas State University. So both chambers, as of their position right now, is $5 million for just K-State's nuclear research accelerator. All of the state universities are sustaining on the House side some version of an operating cut. So the research universities, the KU, K-State, and Wichita State would take a $9.2 million reduction. The 3 regional universities are being reduced $6 million, and that is on the House side, not on the Senate. Both the K-State Vet Med Diagnostics Lab Center, the debt payment for that new building is being put in place in both the House and the Senate. So that is a new development. And then on the back of the page farther down, Steve, there are other provisions that the legislature adds to the budget. So it isn't only dollar amounts at play. Sometimes it's important what language they impose on the budget. So if you keep going down a little bit farther, there we go, you'll see that there is some language that deletes $2 million each from each of the 6 universities' operating accounts, and it moves it to the State Finance Council, requiring the universities to provide certain certifications related to DEI and CRT. There is a proviso, and this is on the House version of the bill. Also in the House, they have adopted language that would require any tenured faculty member placed on a one-year improvement plan. They would prohibit them from receiving a second year of being on a improvement plan. There would be a prohibition on the House version to prohibit any increase in student tuition for 2027 over 2026. And the decision as to how the budget would approach state employee pay has not been addressed in any fashion in either House or Senate. So that is yet to be determined. Happy to stand for questions on all of that.
Thank you, Vice President Frisbee. Yeah, Regent Wolf Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Elaine, first of all, can we get a copy of the new sheet that you just updated?
Yeah.
Trying to keep track of all this. You might have said this, in 2026, I think this chart shows that the blueprint money was lapsed in the House. I thought they put that back in that day.
Yes, they have.
Okay.
Yes, I didn't dwell very much on the current year, but there was movement to lapse almost all of the
Right.
funding that carried over from 25 to 26 because it wasn't spent. And both the House and the Senate have agreed to allow us to keep our student financial aid and our blueprint funding.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I had, the 2.5% that applies to reduce operations at the three research. Last year, I remember there was a 1.5 that was proposed. That got defeated. I mean, in conference committee, we came out on the right side of that one. I can't remember. So 2.5 is obviously more serious, but it seems like there was something to do with a lot of the money's in a block grant, and this disproportionately hits universities because so much of it's personnel. I don't remember exactly what the talking points were on that. Not ringing a bell to anyone.
I remember we put talking points together. I remember we did put talking points together. We can regather those up and times them by 2.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, you bet. Any other questions for Kelly or Elaine? All right. Thank you for the update and thank you for staying on top of it. All right. Any other business to come before the Board of Regents this afternoon? Hearing none, we will stand adjourned.